Hello, this is Francesca Recchia, and I would like to welcome you to a new episode of the Polis Project Dispatches series. Today, we have with us Habeel Iqbal, who is a human rights lawyer working in Kashmir. Habeel practices in the District Court of Shopian and has been involved in several civil society initiatives. He is also a legal consultant with the Association of the Parents of Disappeared Persons in Kashmir. Thanks so much, Habeel, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
So, when we put cyberspace and Kashmir in the same sentence, the immediate association is with the infamous record of internet shutdowns and digital siege that the people of Kashmir have been subjected to. Actually, a few seconds ago, Habil was telling me that the mobile internet connection has been shut down even now as we speak, and he's connected through a broadband. So I'm grateful that this is working out. Um, at some point, a few weeks ago, the 4G internet has been restored after many months of blockade. But in a move that is kind of tinted with tragic irony, along with restoring 4G internet, the Indian government issued a call to recruit volunteers called unlawful content flaggers who are asked to report to the police online posts that are deemed inappropriate or anti national. Now, Kashmir is not new to a culture of suspicion that is built through a tight network of informants and collaborators, which are in fact an integral part of the Indian occupation's apparatus. Habil, can you help us place this idea of recruiting volunteers as unlawful content flaggers or cyber snitches, if you like, into the wider context of Kashmir? And how does this play into an already fragile and fragmented social fabric?
Basically, this is a project which has been started by the Union Ministry, that's Indian Union Ministry. And this project has been started from J&K and Tripura. It's a northeastern state in India. And basically, it has three categories. One is of cyber experts, and another one is of cyber volunteers. And the third category, which we are dealing here, is of those who are going to flag unlawful content on internet. So the third category is the one which needs our attention. It's these people who are going to volunteer for being grouped as cyber volunteers who are going to flag unlawful content, and they have given some categorizations. What are the categorizations? These are like anti-national activities, someone who posts an unlawful content, someone who posts something relating to child trafficking, pornography. So, and this category of people are going to be recruited without any verification also. And why is it problematic? It's problematic in many senses. Firstly, it does not have any legal backing. That is, it does not have any statutory backing. It's a scheme which does not say what is the legal framework within which it's going to work. And we have seen how laws have been kind of not misused, but designed to oppress the people of Kashmir. And why this scheme has been started from Kashmir is because Kashmir is used as a kind of laboratory where Indian government can practice these kinds of tools in which are designed to oppress and suppress the people. So, one basic point is that it does not have a legal sanctity, and more than a legal sanctity, because we have laws here which have legal sanctity. We have laws like Armed Forces Special Powers Act, Public Safety Act, and other Disturbed Areas Act, which have the legal sanctity. But here we are talking about a scheme forget about the legal sanctity, because in Kashmir, laws have been used as engines of oppression. So what this scheme does is it's basically it legitimizes the spying networks, wherein one citizen is kind of spying on the other person, and we don't know who is spying on whom. So in this regard, I would like to say that this takes me back to the Bentham's panoptic prison. The panoptic was this huge tower in which there was one guard who was overlooking all the prisoners. But the prisoners did not know when, at what moment the guard is looking at them. So it made all the prisoners feel that the dead eye lens is constantly hovering over them. So it's not merely that they are going to book people tomorrow for any unlawful content, which I'm sure they will also do that. But it's the feeling that you are being watched and you are under the gaze of someone who can report you for doing anything. Because if we see the definitions of acts, like one of the acts it talks about is radicalization, and we still don't have a universal definition of radicalization. So who is going to define what radicalization means? This amounts to, offshoring of the duties of a judge, of an investigator, to a layman. Any person who volunteers can flog my content for being too radicalized, and we have seen how problematic these definitions can be. So at all levels of the society, the this scheme is going to hover at the minds of the people, and its main design is to kind of make us self-disciplined, and it will force us to go into self-surveillance mode, wherein people will think before posting anything, and ultimately they are going to be in a mode of self censorship. So in that ways, what it does is it makes people's minds and people's speech, uh, what do we say, it makes them think before whatever they post. It makes them feel that their minds and their speech are being controlled. Yeah, please.
That's so basically what you're saying is that people walk around watching their back all the time.
Yeah, yes, precisely. It makes us feel, that the system has the power over us. It makes us believe that it makes us feel that we need to police ourselves. It makes us feel that the official rhetoric is that it's going to be for the benefit of the larger society. It's going to, deal with topics like terrorism, anti-national activities. That is the official rhetoric. But the true design is that it's a suppression of the dissent, of the discontentment growing on in Kashmir from the last so many decades. And we cannot have a legal reference point for this scheme, because as I told you, we have seen in the past how dreadful laws like Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, how they have been passed by the legislature, and how they have been held to be valid by superior courts. So and it's also an affront on the right to privacy, besides being an affront on the right to freedom of speech and expression. So the Supreme Court of India has recently held that right to privacy is a basic fundamental right. It has held right to freedom of speech and expression is also a fundamental right. And in 2015, there was one section, that's section 66A of the Information Technology Act, that that was struck down by the Supreme Court on the precise ground that it criminalizes online activities. It does not fall within the parameters of reasonable restrictions. It struck down 66A of the IT Act. But what this scheme practically does is it reincarnates that struck down section in the form of a scheme, and it gives the vigilantes a legitimacy. Online vigilantism will be legitimized by this scheme, and this invisible eye will always get more and more powerful, because it will be having the sanction of, not only the sanction but the backing of the government of the day. And also what it can do is that when a citizen feels that another citizen is spying on him, he can spy on him. It creates a culture of social distrust. It will create a culture of social distrust, and in that sense it is an attack on the social cohesion of our society. Yeah.
We'll get back to this in a minute, but I would like you to explain us a little more what was the Section 66A, which was quite infamous, and the decision of repealing it was welcomed on many fronts, and how that, if you could explain more clearly how that connects to the current scheme.
Yes. So, Section 66A of the IT Act that talked about online speech, people were charged under Section 66A for saying something which was felt offensive, which was felt annoying by certain people, mostly by the state apparatus. Then the said section was challenged in the Supreme Court by one Shreya Singhal. The name of the case is Shreya Singhal versus Union of India, and it was challenged on the ground that it does not meet the parameters of free speech. It goes against the Article 19 of the Constitution of India, and the Supreme Court of India agreed with the petitioner, and the said section was struck down. Now, what this scheme does is it kind of reincarnates the said section, because the online unlawful content flaggers are going to flag those exact things which they find, somebody may find something as offensive, somebody may find something as annoying, because as I told you earlier, even the courts find it very difficult to come to a certain conclusion what may constitute as radicalization, what may constitute as an anti-national activity. These days, we find that police and the government agencies, they go after students, journalists, activists, academia, uh, and I mean they haven't spared anybody, and they book people for mere things which are so harmless, for writing certain articles, for doing basic job like journalism, and they book them under anti-national activities, under dreadful laws like UAPA. So it's almost impossible to expect a layman to know the nitty-gritties of the law, and to kind of flag the unlawful content. But as I said earlier, that's not their aim. The aim is that they are going. They are telling us that the Big Brother is watching us. Here, I would like to point out one more thing, because already we know that government agencies can do surveillance, intrusive surveillance on you. They can see your WhatsApp chats. We have seen that happening, and it's leaked to the media the next day. But why are they telling us that they are going to recruit these cyber volunteers when they already do what they have been doing? That's we're already under surveillance, we know that. But here they are telling us on our faces that, look, you are under surveillance. And in Kashmir, for example, we had a media policy in 2020 that talked about how media cannot report on events which can glorify certain things. And so that's the media policy. So we came to the conclusion that the media policy which was introduced by the government in Kashmir, that's also against the right to press. And then we have directions for the government servants also. I'll tell you, I have my friends who work in different government departments. They don't post, forget about posting anything on social media. They don't even like any posts anymore on social media because they are afraid that they are going to lose their jobs. And I have seen people who are working in even non-government sectors, they are being called up to police stations to give their statements regarding what they have posted on social media and why they have shared some articles. So as I said earlier, so that's so this scheme can be the modern modern panoptic, which is always kind of hovering over our minds.
I think that there is something very important that you've pointed to, and so we're talking in about the legal realm, but what we are in fact discussing is the impact of all these decisions on society. So the tightening of social control is widespread. And there are attempts at neighborhood policing, and obviously there is a wide network of collaborators and informants in Kashmir. This seems, like a further step, a translation from the physical realm to the cyber realm of this very same attempt. Um, so what I want to try and understand with you is that the impression is that it's we're witnessing a sort of a outsourcing of police. The policing is not only just done by the police forces, but citizens are requested to watch their fellow citizens and take on policing roles towards their neighbors and fellow citizens. I want to understand with you what are the broader legal, social, and political consequences of this situation.
Exactly. See, more than the legal, because as I told you, there are enough laws there on the statute books which are used to book us. There are a plethora of laws under which they can book us and under which they have been booking not only Kashmiris but even the Indians these days. So, what are the social ramifications of this scheme and the political ramifications? I think it's going to have a deeper social and political control over the population. That's one of its main objectives, to control what people talk about, not only to control what people talk about, because this is the first thing they do, they want to do here is to shut us down. They are telling us to shut up, basically. And then they kind of believe that once we are disciplined and once we are reformed, and then this is going to be the new normal. They want to normalize the situation in the sense that they want to control our brain, what we are going to think, and how, as I told you, how the prisoners in a prison where they are kept and they are being told that they have to be reformed. So in that sense, yes, this scheme is meant to control us socially and as well as politically. And as you rightly pointed out, so there was this infamous brigade in Kashmir who were called as Ikhwanis. So they were armed by the government. They were from the local population. They were armed by the government. So in some areas, they still prevalent under defense level committees. In mainland India, it was a Salva Judum, which was these were people who were armed by the government. It was the civilians. So we have also seen how how some civilians were given certain tasks after 9/11 in US also. And but what we saw, what was the fallout of that process also, that it increased Islamophobia many folds, and that was felt to be very problematic. So this scheme, on the ground, we are also feeling that this is also going to reincarnate those collaborators, those ikhwanis, and we would, in local parlance, we call them as e-mukbirs, that's e-informants and e-collaborators. So that's there, and which is going to create divisions and distrust among the local population. Everybody is going to be seen with an eye of suspicion. So I remember I was reading somewhere about the Germans, how Nazis were the secret police of Nazis, how they have functioned at that point of time, that the Gestapo regime, how the Gestapo regime had functioned at that point of time, that it was the Gestapo was the official secret police of the Nazis. They would also be a spy network wherein not wherein the population did not wherein citizens did not know who these Gestapos were. So yes, social and political control and controlling our minds, those are going to be some of the aims of this scheme, wherein an individual will only be an object of information, not a subject of communication. So that's also one of its purposes, that we are going to be reduced to mere objects of information, wherein the interests of the state are, given paramount importance over and above the individuals. We are going to lose our individuality, and state is going to be more and more powerful. And I think this has, fundamentally, the states have always like to restrict the flow of information which is available to the people. And now the the tools have changed over the years. So this scheme can also be seen in that respect, in that context, that yet another tool is being devised by an authoritarian regime to control information and to restrict people's ideas, to restrict their freedom of speech and expression, and thereby hoping that we are going to, kind of mold them, change an entire population by these draconian tools.
This seems to be a bit of a failed project, anyways, no?
No, I won't say this seems to be a failed project, because I would say it has maybe done its job already, because a lot of people may be under this impression that they are being watched, and they may be more, careful in posting whatever they are posting on the social media. As I said, we may not see many first information reports, FIRs being filed on these complaints, but that's not the purpose of this scheme. The purpose of this scheme is that there's a sense of permanent visibility, that the watchman is there on the watchtower. He has an eye on you. So that's its purpose. It's not that actually some people may be arrested under the scheme, and that's when we can say that it has been misused. The purpose is not that. The purpose is to control our minds, and ultimately, of course, our freedom of speech and expression also.
Um, One thing, I mean, you earlier mentioned Kashmir as a laboratory for experimenting with I don't know, social engineering in a sense. Something that we discussed also in previous episodes of our Dispatches series is the fact that one of the consequences of the growing majoritarianism in mainland India is the profound polarization of society, where you're either with us or against us. So if we look at the scheme within this perspective, this this idea of cyber spies seems yet another way to incentivize such divide. Is that
Oh,
can this also be meaningful in Kashmir or?
Uh, I can say partly yes, because we have seen the actual task of the government should have been to check the disinformation which we can see on the social media, and we have seen how social media campaigns are run to promote hatred and how disinformation campaigns are run, but that has not been done. So when we know that government is what government has been doing in the past, and in that context when we see this scheme, so it becomes even more problematic in the context it has been and in the era it has been rolled out. So yes, in that context, I would say that this scheme can, in many ways, being misused. I wouldn't say misused. I would say because that's the design for which it has been. The design of the scheme is such that they don't need to flout the scheme. The design is such that it has been brought in, to curb online activities of people. Sorry, what was your question? I got digressed.
So what I was saying is that in a majoritarian context, you have you're either with us or against us, and so this scheme seems to play into that logic. Is that the case also in Kashmir, or is that not?
See, Kashmir, here I would like to say that you can't see Kashmir and India through the same lens. You have to change the lens when we look at Kashmir and when we look at India. Because many of the problems which Indians or which the Indian civil society, journalists, academia face, some of the problems may be the same, but the context is entirely different when it comes to Kashmir. Why have they started? The pilot project has been launched from Kashmir. And why have we laws? Because Kashmir has to be looked from a political angle. See, when we say that this scheme is an affront of the right to, it basically wants to crush the discontentment that is among the Kashmiris. It basically wants to crush the political aspirations of the people of Kashmir. And that's how I would like to make a slight difference here, because when we look at India, majoritarianism is ruling India, and they are also see the government, Modi regime I'm talking about. It's a very paranoid government, because despite having a brute majority and despite winning so many elections, the government is afraid of activists who are as young as 20, and journalists and students, and it crushes any form of dissent. So this scheme, maybe when they kind of feel that it has attained success, then it may be replicated in India also. And yes, in that context, this scheme can also be used as a tool to further make this point of either you are with us or you are not with us. Those who are not with us, those are the ones who are going to be flagged for the unlawful content. And then any of those actions are going to be reported, and then it takes months and decades in the Indian courts to prove that you are an innocent person.
I want to ask you to play a speculation game. So, if we
Okay.
were to identify the kind of demographic who is content flagger? I mean, how do we imagine that person in the context of Kashmir? Because I mean, I understand in the majoritarian context, when you want to ingratiate those in power, you just spy on everyone who is part of the minority. As you said, this kind of logic does not apply in Kashmir. So, how do we imagine these
So
niches
yes,
within the
so
context?
in Kashmir context, I wouldn't imagine anybody volunteering for it. Nobody is going to volunteer for it. Nobody is going to do that. So in this context, it's going to be the people who are either paid by the state agencies. They may not be on the regular payrolls of the government. We may never come to know that what they have been paid, how they have been paid, and what are going to be the considerations for those people. But one thing is sure, that there are not going to be any volunteers in the strict sense of the term, that is volunteering out of your own free will. It's going to be somebody who is going to be paid or under some kind of distress or some kind of pressure. So it there can be various pressures, there can be various techniques and tools by which you can kind of force somebody to do something against his will, or without his consent. So it's going to be those people who as I told you, who we saw, who picked up guns against the civilians and have various atrocities against their names, and ultimately they were assimilated in the police force or in the armed forces. So yeah, that's my speculation.
So, by all means, is Ikwanis without guns?
Oh, exactly. Yes, Ikhwanis without guns. That
Okay.
that would be the right term for them.
So we're back in the 1990s for this.
Yes. See, India had already covered the physical spaces here. We have seen how it has become practically impossible to have a peaceful protest here in Kashmir at any physical space. Now, what the Kashmiris were doing, that they were coming to this virtual world, a parallel universe. But now India has moved from the physical spaces. I'm not saying they have left the physical spaces, but they want to have an all encompassing domination, control over Kashmiris. So they are not leaving the virtual world free. So from the physical spaces into the virtual world, they want a complete domination, a full spectrum dominance, what we can call.
Quite a grim picture. We encourage our listeners and to send us questions while we continue our conversation. Um, so I want to get into the letter of this new scheme. So as we discussed earlier, one of the tasks of these content flaggers is to report anti-national content. Now, the term anti-national has become a daily currency and a shorthand for anything that represents systematic criminalization of dissent. So, what I want you to help us understand is what are the implications of the increased institutionalization of this term?
Yes. See, who is an anti-national? The term anti-national, it's a political term, basically. It is a political term, but it needs to be defined legally so that somebody can be booked under some statute, under a law, which says that this particular activity is an anti-national activity. But as we have seen, we have laws here like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. We have a law like Public Safety Act, under which talks about under which administrative detention is legalized. So all the definitions under various statutes, they are very broad, they are overly generalized, and that's why it becomes problematic. Any of your actions can be said to be anti-national, and then it ultimately boils down to what the government wants. And here I would like to say, regretfully, the courts have also failed us, because if the courts would have come down heavily on the government functionaries, that you are slapping these laws unnecessarily and you are resorting to arbitrary and illegal arrests, then we could have seen a much better picture. But the courts have continuously been failing us. They have failed to rein in the government authorities, the police, and that's why we see an increased use of extraordinary laws like the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, like the Public Safety Act, or for that matter, National Security Act, which functions in mainland India. So these definitions, by their very nature, are very imprecise. They are very vague, and they are overly generalized, and they give a free hand to the police to book anybody, to implicate anybody. And as I said earlier, then it takes months or years together. We have seen how uh, some of the Indian activists, I'm talking about Sudha Bhardwaj, Rona Wilson, and others, they have been kept in jails for years together without a trial and under a dreadful UAPA. And what I am seeing, because I practice in a lower court in Shopian, what I am seeing is that the general law, which was the ordinary law, ordinary criminal law, is hardly used these days. Every other person, I won't say every second person, but every person who the police arrests is being booked under this dreadful UAPA, in which bail is virtually impossible for 180 days. You just forget about the bail once you are arrested under this dreadful law UAPA, and only when the statutory period of 180 days is complete, a person gets bail. And the courts are not coming to the rescue of the people. So, yes, here I would like to add something more, that maybe if somebody challenged the constitutionality of this scheme in a court of law, and hoping we get a good judge, then I don't think this is going to be there, on the statute books, or it's going to have a larger life period.
I mean, I'm tempted to ask you a question that will take us a little aside because, what is a good judge this day? I suppose is difficult discussion
Oh,
that.
yeah. So, a good judge would mean that one who upholds the rule of law and not some rotten ideology.
Um, just let's get back to what we were discussing, and you touched upon this, but I would like you to explain us a little more. Um, I want to understand to what extent is the category of anti-national constitutionally definable, or if it is at all.
It's very difficult, but the courts here, I'm talking in the Indian context, the courts here have in the past, for example, there is one Supreme Court judgment from Indian Supreme Court, that's known as Kedarnath judgment, that talked about, because these laws are overlapping, anti-national, UAPA, sedition, these are all overlapping laws. So one big test is that, which Kedarnath judgment has also talked about, is whether there is an incitement to violence or not. I may say something which may be very rude, which may be very offensive, which may be very derogatory, but still, if it does not somebody to incite to violence, that's the test. But unfortunately, nobody seems to be listening to that judgment. Nobody seems to be following that guideline. Uh, we see that people are being arrested for sedition, for trivial acts. In our district, that's Shopian, some 11 boys were booked for UAPA, under UAPA, for playing a cricket match. They were playing a cricket match in the memory of their friend who used to be a cricketer, and he happened to be a militant also. So their case was that we were celebrating the life of a cricketer. He also happened to be a militant at a later point of time. But for the last 5 months, and at this point when we are talking, they continue to be in jail for simply playing a cricket match. So I remember there were some students from Kashmir who were cheering for Pakistan cricket team, and they were booked for sedition. So, such is the state of affairs. But when I say law is clear on the point that if you do something, if you say something which incites violence, and law has and courts in some instances have gone to the point that if mere sloganeering cannot be an offense, if you just resort to mere sloganeering, that's not an offense. There should be some incitement to violence. There has to be a public disorder by what you say, and there has to be a direct connection between what you have said, what you have written, and the actual violence or the physical disturbance. There has to be a direct link. Sorry, I can't
Sorry.
hear. Oh, you had muted.
Sorry. No, so I was just thanking you because this is all very complicated for someone like me who's not a legal expert. So you're really helping us unpacking all these complexities. Just again going back to the scheme. So as you mentioned before, these volunteers are asked to report content that is deemed harmful, and the scope of what may be harmful is very broad. It goes from child pornography to rape to terrorism, as you mentioned, radicalization and anti national activities. Now, in the Indian constitution, there is no list of words that are banned or termed anti national. So when these people flag this content, read social media posts, it's uh, basically up to them to decide what kind of content falls under these categories. So it seems that these decisions then will be made entirely on the basis of personal discretion and thus open the ground to a possibly uncontrollable margin of arbitrariness. Now, what I would like to understand, and you sort of mentioned, but I would want you to expand on this, is whether any of this has legal binding, because these are basically private citizens who are reporting activities. So, what is the legal binding of these decisions? But also, what are the spaces of protection for regular citizens who may be targeted by this reporting, possibly on the basis of personal revenge or blackmailing?
Yeah. So, as I said earlier, going to be legal or not, because we have seen how they have passed these draconian laws previously. So I wouldn't be surprised if this scheme is also granted some legal color, and the courts also pass the same. So basically, to my understanding, the question is more about whether this is ethical, whether this is moral, whether this scheme follows the rules of natural justice. So on those counts, on all these counts, the scheme fails. And see, they have said that these content flaggers are only going to flag the content. It's ultimately the discretion lies with the police authorities whether they are going to act on those complaints, whether they are going to. They have said basically that they have some mechanism in which they will have some filtering of these complaints. But to my understanding, as we talked about how difficult it is to have a definition of these activities, it will be impossible to expect from these laymen to if we believe that they are going to act in some good faith, that they are, even if we believe that they are going to act bona fidely, it's very difficult for an ordinary citizen to say what is unlawful and what is not lawful, what is anti-national and what is pro-national, because these days we see that the definitions are changing very fast. The social context is there, the political context is there, and basically they want us to be what Foucault called as docile bodies. That's they want us to be very docile, to act in a way which suits the authorities, to act in a way which is not prejudicial to the interests of the parties who are governing us right now, and the system which has been governing us over the past so many decades. Uh, uh, Again, I would like to point out here that basically this scheme has two objectives. One is discipline, and another one is the punishment aspect. It basically wants to, discipline and punish us, and then expects kind of, reformation in their sense, what they may say, now you are de-radicalized and now you are reformed. You are not talking about utopian ideas of rights. You are not asking for any political rights. Your political aspirations are in tandem with what we are saying, with what we are doing. So that's the ultimate goal. And for them, legality has never been a problem, because we have seen how we have people here who are under jails for decades together under administrative detention. We have seen how pellet guns have been legalized here. We have seen how hundreds and thousands of people have been killed here, and all all this has happened because they have the sanction of the law, because law sanitizes them. Law has been used as an enabler here. So for me, more than the legality, it's the morality and the ethics of it which can be used as a counter argument,
Yes,
because
I mean, you would,
we don't want the court, for example, we challenge the constitutionality of this scheme in a court of law, and it upholds the constitutionality, and then it kind of gives it more it legitimizes the scheme and gives it more sanctity. Because for many a people, when they killing a person can be bloodless, but when you have the backing of a law, it can seem to be bloodless.
right, which is quite tragic. We have a question from an audience member. His name is Nasir Ahmed. He says, "Do you think the policies which they have adopted in Kashmir to crush and prosecute the people will be also applied in the mainland India to crush dissent?" That's a bit of a $1 million question.
Uh, See, as I said earlier, Kashmir has been used as a laboratory for the power politics. And what they start doing in Kashmir, it has kind of reached mainland India. We have seen how earlier people in Kashmir were booked under UAPA, journalists in Kashmir were booked under UAPA, activists were booked under UAPA, and now similar trend has been going on in mainland India as well. So in some ways yes, but in many ways no also, because Kashmir has its own political context which mainland India does not have. So it's always going to be more about human rights violations in India. It's always going to be how to make this better, how to prevent the human rights violations. But when it comes to Kashmir, it's more about the political context. The human rights violations here, they happen in a political context. They don't happen in a vacuum. So in that context, the two are different.
Um, I mean, you've given me so much food for thought, so I'll have to allow to organize some of my thoughts to ask you follow up questions. But in the meanwhile, I have a question regarding to something that happened to you. So I mean, this whole idea of being watched, as you said, is neither new nor started recently, and what it seems to me is that this new scheme is only just surveillance on steroids, but it was already fully there at like at a different level, if you will. And last year, you were interrogated for 6 hours for a tweet that you wrote. Can you tell us the story? What happened?
Oh, so the story goes like that the president of High Court Bar Association Kashmir, Mr. Mia Kuyum, had been booked under Public Safety Act administrative detention post August 5th, 2019, when the limited autonomy of J&K was taken away unilaterally by India. Thereafter, it arrested around 600 people by their own estimates under this administrative detention. And Mr. Kuyum was one among them. At the time of his arrest, he before that he was fighting the case for the 37, that's Article 370 of the Constitution of India. The case was going on in the Supreme Court of India. Mr. Kuyum was representing one of the parties there. So he was imprisoned, he was detained post August 5th, 2019. And then, when he filed a habeas corpus petition in the High Court of J&K, the judge dismissed the High Court. The judge dismissed the habeas corpus petition on grounds which were very bizarre, which were very interesting in some ways, but surely not what the law would have kind of without any legal backing, I would say. So I criticized the judgment on social media. I wrote that the court has not acted in its wisdom, and he should have been free by now, but the court has come up with bizarre reasoning. So thereafter, I was caught. An FIR, a first information report, was filed in this case, because so many people online in on social media had criticized this judgment, and I was called for questioning regarding what I had written and why I had written these, why I had criticized the judgment on social media. So my criticism of that judgment was taken as a crime, and I was called for questioning for those tweets. And then I had to explain to them how what a law of contempt is, how they could have booked me under some different law, but not the Indian Penal Code. And ultimately, after 6 hours, I was let off. So yeah, personal experience that was. And talking about surveillance, online surveillance, cyber surveillance, in my case it was it was different. For, as I said, for Kashmiri, surveillance is a different ball game. They don't need online surveillance. They check our phones, they take our phones, and then they ask for the passcodes. They can they scan our phones, and they check the galleries. My phone was taken away, my passcode was written on the back of it, and then it was with them for 3 long hours. I don't know what they were doing with my phone. So the surveillance is here is on a completely different level.
We're close to the end, but I think that there is something that you brought our attention to more than once, and that is the very, very fine line between legality and morality. Now, I don't know if, I mean, this would be hours of discussion, I suppose, but I don't know if you want to comment on this. Uh,
So yeah, in our context, the laws here, they have the backing of the legislature. They have been passed by the legislature, and in that sense of the term, because they have been upheld when they have been challenged in a court of law, their legality has been upheld by the courts of the law. But the spirit of the rule of law, they go against the very spirit of the rule of the law. So legally they may be just laws, but when we apply the yardstick of morality, ethics, they fall far behind. So that's why I say that we may have laws here which may be legally fine, which may talk about rights, and which may talk about different things. But when we test them on the touchstone of morality and ethics, they can't sustain.
um, just a general question to conclude. Um, so, Kashmir is constantly be showcased as a spectacle of normality. The last one a couple of days ago to a bunch of foreign dignitaries. What is the real situation?
Yeah, the real situation is that mobile internet uh, has been snapped in Chopin from where I'm speaking to you. The normalcy is that two policemen have been killed today in Srinagar. The normalcy is that three militants have been killed in Shopian today. So this is just one. This is just one particular day of about which I'm talking about. So this is all optics. I can say that these are merely optics, and just to cater to the audience, whatever little audience these optics have. The reality on the ground is totally different. The reality on the ground is that people's political aspirations are being oppressed, and people's uh, they want to control our minds. They have already controlled our bodies. Now this scheme has to be seen in that light, in that context.
Is there anything else that you would like to add to conclude?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. And we'd like to see more conversations on Kashmir. And Polis has been doing great work because it has. I have seen a lot of conversations happening on Kashmir. So please keep them going.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the good humor in spite of everything. And
Uh,
please keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being with us today. And if you have listened, heard, or read something that you liked on our website, please consider supporting us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.